My dog is afraid of slippery floors. It goes all the way back to when she was a puppy. When we first brought her home, she realized that laminate floors were slippery, and so she refused to leave the rug. We ended up laying little rug islands around the house and gradually extending them until she realized she could, in fact, walk on the floor without immediate calamity. And as she's gotten older, she hasn't grown out of it. She has become convinced that if the floor is slippery, she needs to be lifted off the ground to wherever it is that she needs to go. She has a determined helplessness about it, and an insistent whine that's a little piercing, where she will sit on the edge of the bed and will wear you down until you lift her up. She has become convinced that she cannot jump onto the completely reasonable distance for the small dog, even though I have seen her make many other instances, even though she has not suffered any injury that I know of due to slick floors. She won't even make an attempt. She will sit at the foot of the bed, whining, despairing, convinced she is totally helpless in the world, a victim of unforeseen circumstances, staring up at the place that she wants to be above her. And trust me, I have not been able to outweight her. Because she has become so convinced the only way to get where she wants is to have someone pick her up and carry her, absolutely no amount of waiting will convince her to try literally anything else. The angels said to the disciples at Jesus' ascension, "People of Galilee, why do you stand there staring at the sky? As if you are waiting for it to open and save you. Why do you stand there staring at the sky as if the only thing to do is to wait and whine? Why do you stand there staring at the sky?" And yet here I am. After one more shooting, and all I have is this deep lament and despair that just wants to look up to heaven and say, "Jesus, if you want to come back and fix this at any point, please do." Because apparently we are too broken to do it ourselves. As I feel stuck in my helplessness and my fury and my despair, and in this feeling that there is nothing I can do, that makes my feet feel like lead where I'm standing. Why do you stand there staring at the sky, waiting for the heavens to open and magically make it right? I can measure my ministry career in senseless acts of violence. One of the very first sermons that I ever preached in front of a congregation was the Sunday after Virginia Tech. My internship supervisor at the time went over the video of the sermon with me after the fact, stopping every 30 seconds or so to point out things I could have done better. And it was tough to hear, but honestly helpful. Because writing sermons after tragedies has become a legitimate pastoral genre. as I can look at past reflections after tragedy and place them together after which shooting was for which one. Sandy Hook was on my birthday. Stoneman Douglas was on Ash Wednesday. There are sermons that we have laid aside to preach the tragedy of the moment. And there are times we have included a tragedy only in prayers because of the relentless onslaught that if we preached on it every week, we could preach on nothing else. And the gospel is not just one of reaction where evil gets to set the agenda. But then came this week. And I was thinking about my sermon earlier in the week because it would be my first time in the pulpit since the shooting in Buffalo, where, fueled by racist ideology and enabled by access to firearms, a domestic terrorist killed 10 black children of God in a grocery store. And I hadn't had a time to preach since then. And then what happened? I can't bring myself to say that 19 elementary-age children were killed, along with 2 teachers again. Because that's the part that makes me feel ill. How can something this terrible happen more than once and we do nothing? And after this long, the rage and the fear and the helplessness, they all get rolled into one. How can it be that we do nothing? That the only demonstrable change since all of this started is that now they do drills in school for lockdown. As early as my kids' preschool, they ran drills hiding in the bathroom with 3-year-olds huddled with their teacher from what they called a bear. How can it be that we have put all this burden on children and educators? On the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "Which of you, if your son asked for bread, would give him a stone? Or if he asked for a fish, would give him a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more so will God in heaven give good gifts to those who ask God?" But then I look at what we've given our children, of the burdens we have placed on them, which we as a people are unwilling to bear ourselves. And I thought we were going to be able to give them a better world. And if we cannot change enough to stop school violence, gun violence in schools, which is so clearly evil, what chance do we have of making enough change fast enough to give them a habitable climate, a safe world? Which of you, if your child asked for bread, would give them a stone? Which of you, if your child asked for safety, would give them a lockdown drill? Why are you looking at the sky? The disciples have been through it all. Left it all to follow Jesus, watched him as a teacher and worker of miracles, seen him stand up to authorities and be cut down by those authorities, left to die on a cross and then resurrected, and they have an earnest question for him. Is this the time you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Is this the time when you're going to make it all right? Put the world back as it's supposed to be? And you can feel it in the yearning eyes as they look to the sky where they last saw him and is now empty. Is now the time that you will save us? Are you here to save us from ourselves, to make it all right? Now are you here to save us? And the answer is heartbreakingly, no, I already did. It is not for you to know the time. Jesus, who has been taken up to heaven, will come in the same way you saw him go, or as I interpret it, Jesus will come the same way you have seen him come. Jesus came as a poor child. Jesus came not apart from the sorrows of the world, but in the midst of them. Jesus came in the midst of suffering. Jesus was moved by those who are broken and in pain. Jesus came to speak love in the midst of those on the margins, and Jesus who held children in a special place of love. And I can picture God, the parent Trinity, looking upon God's child on the cross and saying, I'm so sorry, I thought we were giving you a better world. Looking on the suffering and the cross, I'm so sorry, my child, I thought I could give you a better world. If we are crying out to God to save us, God already did. We have a Savior. But God's saving work doesn't take us out of the world, away from the world. As much as one thing can think of is taking maybe all the people you love to a cabin far away from everything and locking all the doors. Why are you looking up to the sky? Because that isn't where God's salvation is coming from. God's saving work brought God into the world, close to the world, close enough to be heartbroken by the world, and in the midst revealed that God's grace for the world, proclaim hope amidst the world, show the transforming power of love in the world, and to say that work as disciples is to be witnesses in the world, in this world. Why are you looking at the sky? Because our work, our service, our call is within this world through the hard work of loving each other. As much as I want to give up on the whole lot of us. Love is asking us again and again and again to follow our God into the places that are hard, to go places as hard as the deeply broken democracy in this country. To refuse to give in to exhaustion or despair, to keep showing up again and again and again in love, to say we will not be overcome by the endless cycles of evil, but will show up again and again with urgency that something needs to change now. To show up in the fractured dialogue in this country to say, our beloved children of God, I believe we have enough humanity in the midst of us to universally call something atrocious that is a literal atrocity. I believe we can find some common ground there. And so no, I do not want debates around one mealy-mouthed law and how it won't solve anything. The bar is not to do something. Let's do 10 things. 10 substantial changes, and at least pretend we're invested in trying to stop this. And I will admit that I do, as a pastor, have some thoughts about what those answers are not. Do not tell me the answer is prayer in schools. Because it is not up to children to pray hard enough for their safety when adults are not willing to accept the merest of sacrifices to help ensure it. Do not tell me the answer is more guns, or that it is somehow an insult to personhood not to have access to every type of deadly weapon. Because as we have seen clearly in the last week, having a gun does not magically make you a hero. Despite the deep myths of our nation, a gun in the hands of a person is still a fallible person, still at the whims of human realities of cowardice and despair and aggression or hatred or simply mistakes. And all of these things of humanity, when they happen with access to firearms, can happen with deadly consequences. Which means that 2020 had the most gun deaths in the United States than any year on record. And as a pastor, for those who claim ourselves as disciples of Christ, do not tell me that the right to a gun has anything to do with faith. There may be reasons to have a gun, but Jesus doesn't talk about a world where everyone has weapons. Jesus does ask many things of us. You give them something to eat. Turn the other cheek. Love your enemies and let the children come to me. But when Jesus was being arrested, when he was being threatened in body, he told his disciples to put the sword down. He told his disciples to put down the sword. And it is nothing but heresy to imagine Christianity is at all compatible with a white masculinity that sees its power through violence. Jesus was not one who inflicted violence on the world, he was one who suffered it. He was one who suffered it. And showed that there was another way to transform the world. Why do you stand there looking at the sky? I know too well that feeling of numbness, of helplessness, of despair. And yet Jesus calls us to be witnesses to love in the world. He who was peaceful and never passive. We take our grief, our anger, our sorrow, and bring it back with us with the determination we are not going to give our children a stone when they ask for bread. We are going to bring our love to phone calls and organizing, to follow the leadership of those who know this work, to our conversations within those within our sphere of influence, and to ask ourselves the hard questions of what are we willing to change and let go? What do we need to break down to create the world God imagines? Why do you stand there looking at the sky? May the angels wake us up and send us out to be witnesses of God's love in a world that is in desperate need of courage. Amen.